So one of the biggest debates going on in the NBA right now is who is the better center, Nikola Jokic or Joel Embiid? And before I actually give you my answer, let's take a deeper look into both of these centers. Now I'm going to start off with Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. Embiid and the Sixers are currently sitting at 26-19. They're the number 6 seed in the Eastern Conference. And Joel on the season's averaging 28, 10, 4, and a block and a half, which is phenomenal. He's shooting 50% from the field, 39% from deep, which is ridiculous, and 81% from the charity stripe as well. His player efficiency rating's at 30.9. I believe he's number 2 or number 3 in the NBA right now in terms of PER. But Embiid, the last 13 games, has elevated himself into that MVP conversation, going on an absolute tear. Let me read you off some of these numbers from his last 13 games really quickly. 40-13, 50-12 versus my Orlando Magic in 27 minutes, 32-8, 32-12, 25-13, 31-6, 31-8, 31-12, 31-5, 31-15-10 in a triple-double, 34-7, 36-11, 36-13. That is absurd numbers. That is ridiculous. And Joel Embiid is already widely acknowledged as one of the best centers in the NBA and probably a top 2 or 3 center in terms of defense alongside a guy like Rudy Gobert. Joel Embiid's been playing phenomenal. He's probably the best overall two-way center in the NBA. Now let's talk about a guy, Nikola Jokic. Now when we talk about a guy like Nikola Jokic, obviously he won the MVP last season and he's in the MVP conversation yet again. But Jokic on the season, they're currently sitting in the number 6 seed with the Denver Nuggets. They're 23-21, but Jokic is averaging 26, 14, and 7.5 assists. He's shooting 57% from the field, 37% from deep, which is still great for a center, and 78% from the free throw line. His PER is at a 33, which if the season ended today would be the highest single season player efficiency rating ever recorded in the history of the NBA. That's higher than Wilt Chamberlain in 1961 at 32.1, Michael Jordan, or any other player. Jokic would finish with the highest PER if the season ended today. And you have to also consider the fact that they've been doing this without Michael Porter Jr., who had that lower back surgery earlier in December, and then obviously no Jamal Murray. He tore his ACL before the playoffs last season. I understand that the Sixers and Daryl Morey haven't really built the proper team around Joel Embiid as of right now because of Ben Simmons not being there. And that's a whole nother situation I could get into. They don't have Ben Simmons, but otherwise, this 76ers team is relatively intact to where they were last year. Now, let's actually compare the two, and let me tell you why I believe Jokic is the best center in the NBA. I've already made a video talking about why he should be the MVP weeks ago before everyone started talking about Joel Embiid being in the MVP conversation. I will link to that up above. So I want to start off defensively when I talk about both these centers. Now, I give it to you. Joel Embiid is the better defensive center. He's the better two-way center in comparison to a guy like Jokic. Jokic doesn't really play defense like that. But if you want to talk defense, yeah, Embiid averages more blocks per game. Jokic is at 1. I believe Embiid's at 1.4. So it's marginal, but also defensive win shares, the advanced analytic when you talk about defense, Jokic is at a 2.4 and Embiid's at a 1.9. So I feel like that almost cancels it out, but I'll give it to you. I think Jokic is not the defender that Joel Embiid is. I agree. Embiid is the better two-way defender. But let's talk about Joel Embiid's mishaps, which is something that I definitely hold against him. Now, key situations when I talk about Joel Embiid. Game 7 at Toronto in the 2019 conference semifinals, or was that the conference finals? I forget, but it was Game 7 in Toronto, whatever it was. He shot 6 of 18 from the field, 1 of 6 from 3 in an elimination game, and then Kawhi Leonard hits one of the greatest shots in NBA history. So, not good efficiency there. Game 5 versus Atlanta at the Wells Fargo Center at home. He's down 107-104 with 10.9 seconds left, and he misses both free throws and he bricks the second one. The Hawks end up getting the ball and the rebound. Sixers lose that game. Then they go on to win Game 6, and then they obviously lose Game 7 at home. Ben Simmons, doesn't dunk the ball. We know the story. How about this? Joel Embiid, in his return to Toronto, this is his first game back in Toronto after the 76ers had lost to the Toronto Raptors the previous year in the playoffs. He scores 0 points, 0 of 11 from the field. He had 13 rebounds, 4 turnovers, and 5 personal fouls. But he had 0 points in that game. We saw one of the most iconic Stephen A. rants ever when Stephen A. blasted Joel Embiid for that. They got to hold that against him. Now let's actually talk about them both in the playoffs because, great players are determined by what they do in the playoffs. Let's talk about Jokic and Embiid in the playoffs. Embiid in the playoffs, 24, 11, and 1.8 blocks. Great numbers. And then Jokic in the playoffs is 26, 11, and 6 in the playoffs. Even if you want to go to last year's playoffs, Jokic was averaging 30, 11, and 5. Like, Jokic is just the better player in general. I think he has more of an effect on his team winning. He does more for his team with less. I think you could put Jokic on my Orlando Magic, and he makes everyone around him better, and he would make that team a lot better. Granted, because he is an MVP, and because he's one of the best centers, if not the best center in the NBA, which I believe he is, Embiid, while his impact is definitely felt, Embiid has his moments where he comes up short. And not every player is perfect, but I've seen it with Embiid. And I think Jokic offensively just is on an absolute different level. And while I do agree Joel Embiid is the better defensive center, I think Nikola Jokic is better. It's definitely a debate. I understand why people think it's Embiid. I disagree, but that's just my take on it. But that's it for this video. I want to say thank you guys so much for watching. I want to know, who do you guys think is the best center in the NBA between a guy in Nikola Jokic and Joel Embiid? If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure you guys like, turn on notifications, and hit the subscribe bell to stay tuned for more NBA and Jacksonville Jaguars content that I do here on YouTube. But Brett James, aka BJ, I'm out, y'all. Peace.